Hello. Today I'd like to talk to you about present tenses, and at the very end I will also throw in a small section about future tenses. So for the present tenses, there are two basic ones that we consider present tenses. The first one is simple present, and I'm sure you know that with this one you have to put an S on your verb in the third person singular. And the other one is present progressive tense. And for that one, we conjugate the verb to be as your auxiliary and then add ing on the verb form. So we're going to look at why and how we use these. The first one about simple present, something that we often forget is to add your third person singular S. So if your subject is he or she or it, in the affirmative you add an S. She studies, it snows. So why do we do that? I don't know. We just do. I blame everything on Shakespeare. And of course, the same rule applies that if you're making your verb into a negative or a question and the subject is he, she, or it, you have to conjugate your verb, your auxiliary, with your S here and here. Another thing we often forget is that words like everybody, someone, anybody, everybody, etc., they are singular, so that the verb that you use has to be singular as well. Everyone is helping us, or nobody wants to come to my party. Simple present really involves three basic rules. We use it to talk about a fact. So my brother lives and works in Vancouver. You see I've put the S on my verbs. For a habit, the bus leaves at 12:30 every day. So even though, well, I guess it's a habit. And a general truth, many people enjoy traveling. So if we have two different auxiliary forms in the simple present, first one is the verb to be, and I'm sure you already know how to conjugate that. So if you have the verb to be in your sentence, you conjugate it, and you also use be for your auxiliary in negatives and questions if your main verb is already the verb to be. And we use do as an auxiliary for every other verb in English which is not the verb to be. So as long as you're working with something in the simple present. Spelling of third person singular verbs. If your verb in the base form ends in S, CH, X, or SH, you add ES. If your verb ends in a consonant, for example, the letter R plus Y, then you change your Y to I and you add ES. However, if your verb ends in a vowel like A and then the letter Y, you just add S. However, most verbs are easy. You just add S to the verb in the third person singular. For negatives and questions, don't forget it's your auxiliary that you conjugate and not your verb. So if I had my regular sentence, he wants to go to the zoo, for example, in this case I would say he doesn't want. The S is no longer here, it's on my auxiliary. For negatives, just to review this a little bit more, it's that same idea. If you have the verb to be, if that's the main verb, you use that. You don't use anything else. You say she isn't at work. However, if you don't have an auxiliary, then you use do. So we don't have a car. He doesn't like cats. And of course you have other examples here. For questions, it's the same rule. If you have be, you use it. So if the be is in your main example, so I could say she is late. Why is she late? In this case, it's important to consider that the structure changes. So this is my question word, my auxiliary, my subject, and verb. So I've taken my verb from here and I put it in front of my subject. If you have no auxiliary, then and the object of the sentence is the answer to your question, then you use a form of the verb to do. So he studies every day. How often does he study? And again, I take the S from here, I put it onto my auxiliary, and it is no longer used on my verb. However, if the answer to your question is the subject of your sentence and you're answering a question about who or what, then you don't use an auxiliary and you don't change your verb form either. Sarah lives in Granby. Who lives in Granby? I can just simply substitute the word who for Sarah, and you see there's no difference here. The present progressive, or we also call it the present continuous, is what I'm going to explain next. The most important thing about the progressive structure is that we can use it with action verbs only, which means, and this is a nifty rule, it doesn't work all of the time. There are a few other exceptions. But if the action happens in your heart or the action happens in your head, then you cannot put an ing on your verb. So why do we use the present progressive? We use it, first of all, to talk about an action at the time of speaking. So I'm teaching you the present progressive right now. I am teaching. It's also a temporary action in general time. So they are living in an apartment this year. Or a planned action in the near future. He is leaving in 20 minutes. So you see, I can use the present progressive to talk about something in the future. How do I make it, or how do I conjugate it? I use the auxiliary be, which I conjugate into the present, and ing. I am writing a letter. You're not sleeping right now, I hope, etc. We look at the different examples. So the important thing is that we have conjugated the verb to be according to the subject. So I am, you are, he, she, it is, we are, and they are. One trick or one concern, I guess, for progressive verbs, whether it's present progressive, past progressive, present perfect progressive, future perfect progressive, etc., because there are many progressive structures, is the spelling. So if your verb is one syllable and it ends in vowel consonant, then you double your consonant. And I'll explain why in class. It's due to phonetics and pronunciation. However, if your verb ends in W or X, then you don't double it. If you have one syllable, or even, I suppose, more, and your verb ends in E, then you just drop the E here and add ing. And again, I'll explain this in class for pronunciation. It's because of pronunciation. If your verb ends in Y, and it doesn't matter if it's a consonant plus Y or a vowel plus Y, you simply add ing. If your verb is two syllables, and the stress is on the first syllable when it's in the base form, for example, I say visit, I don't say visit, then I do not double my consonant. However, if you have a two-syllable verb and the stress in the base form is on the second syllable, for example, begin, I don't say begin, begin, then you have to double your consonant. Finally, if your verb ends in IE, then you change the IE to Y and you add ing. This is a list of some of the heart and head verbs, which means these are common verbs that cannot be used in a progressive structure. For example, you cannot say I am understanding you. You say I understand you, or because understand happens in your head. Or you can say I love you. Of course, that happens in your heart, and so you cannot say I am loving you. McDonald's does. They say I'm loving it, but well, they're wrong. Finally, future tenses. Of course, there are more than these four basic ones, but I'm just going to talk about these ones right now. You can use a simple present to talk about the future. So the bus leaves in 5 minutes. Of course, you can use the present progressive, as I said earlier, if you're talking about a planned action. So we are meeting tonight. We use will to talk about a promise or spontaneous decision. So if somebody knocks at the door, knock, 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 I say, I'll get it. I will get it. So it's a spontaneous decision. And be going to, so I conjugate the verb to be and I use going to. Again, this is for a planned action. I'm sure you know that when you're writing, you say, we use the structure like this. He is going to. Of course, when we speak, we often say he's gonna. It's a structure of a reduced speech. So basically that is it. If you have any questions or concerns, you may ask me in class. There will be homework. There are supplementary exercises on the webpage that I showed you. And thank you for listening. So have a nice day.